Alright, now let me just start by saying that I'm a pretty big Sonic fan. The Sega Genesis was really kind of my first console. Up until then, I'd always played games on the Commodore 64 or maybe the PC, but the Genesis was really kind of my entry into a proper video game console. And so because of that, Sonic is really important to me, and it's just such a shame to see where the series has gone to right now. Every time a new Sonic game comes out, I sit there wondering, is this going to be the time where they bring back all that fun I had on the Genesis, or is this just going to be another Sonic 06? Now, if you don't remember Sonic 2006, let me go ahead and just tell you that it easily sets the bar for the worst possible Sonic game. And so the good news is there's nowhere to go from there but to kind of work your way up. And in the 7 or so years since then, we've had some titles that, some of them are probably better off forgotten, but every now and then you see something come along that's, good or at least passable. And so now we have Sega's latest Sonic game, which is called Sonic Lost World. And unfortunately, I have to say, it really feels like a step backwards more than anything else. Lost World has a fairly wide array of problems. A lot of its negative qualities work in tandem with its other negative qualities, and as a whole, it creates a product that I'm really pretty unhappy with. I would say that the game starts off almost within the first few steps in kind of a negative light. You start off the very first level, you take a couple steps forward, and the very first thing that you notice is at the top of the screen, there's a little colorful icon on the TV. And this icon corresponds with a spot on your gamepad, and basically what it is it's a tutorial. So if you click on this icon, it will open up the tutorial system and walk you through what buttons you need to push to keep going. This is kind of counterintuitive to how you want to play the game, because A, it means that every time you want to read a tutorial, you literally have to pause what you're doing to sit there and read a 3-page slide about what's going on. And then B, the second problem here is that if you run too far past the tutorial, it disappears, which means that if you want to read it, you're going to have to backtrack and go back to where you were. You basically have to take Sonic to a full stop to turn around and hit the icon. Now, this problem kind of illustrates what I think is the biggest issue that Lost World has, which is that going fast, moving quickly through the levels, is rarely rewarded, and actually most of the time it's kind of punished. Moving fast in Sonic Lost World is really to your detriment. There are a lot of spots in levels where they like to throw just a sudden change at you, a jump where you normally wouldn't expect one. There's a couple spots I can think of where you have to completely flip yourself upside down on the level just to not fall off a cliff, basically, as you run. And the problem is that when they throw things at you like that are really quick and hard to correct by, you wind up dying, and it's just kind of a frustrating experience. And there's a lot of that in Lost World. Now, I probably don't need to tell you this, but Sonic games work the best when you're moving fast. The faster Sonic's going, the more fun you're having. It's almost like a scientific rule. Now, the problem is that traditionally, in the platforming genre, going fast is kind of counterintuitive to what you're trying to accomplish. The faster your character moves, the harder it is to make quick jumps, the harder it is to address enemies as they come at you. And that's the challenge that Sonic has to solve. And I think that a good example of a game that did this really well was Rayman Legends. If you play Rayman, they found a really easy solution to this problem, particularly with the musical levels. The music kind of gives you cues for when you're going to need to jump, and because of that, you're able to move a lot quicker, and it always feels like you're kind of in control of the character, even though he's moving really fast. Lost World is kind of the opposite in that it rarely feels like you're in control of the character, and in fact sometimes feels like the exact opposite, like in these ice levels in the middle of the game where Sonic's sliding everywhere, and it takes something that was already pretty difficult to control, and it just makes it even harder. Now, to make matters worse, a lot of the stuff that's out to kill you kind of behaves in unpredictable ways. So take a look at this enemy right here. Just by looking at him, is there any way that you can tell how you're going to need to beat him? Well, there's no real obvious solution, and the problem is that there's a very specific way that most enemies have to be beaten, but none of the enemies really give you any hints as to how that way works. And so if you look at this enemy and you do a homing attack, well, as you can see, it doesn't really work very well. This is one of the enemies where you have to use the kick. And so the problem is that right there exemplifies a lot of this game, which is just trial and error. And a lot of times you're just memorizing the level. You just die a few times and you figure out, oh, I need to do this when I go here. And same with the enemies. You'll get killed by a couple of them before you figure out what exactly you're supposed to do. Now, I don't think that trial and error is a bad way to design your game, but I do think it's bad when you combo it up with lives in a platformer. And I can't even believe that this game has this. It's such an old, archaic holdover. We're not pumping quarters into these things anymore. There's no reason to limit the number of lives that you get in a game. So Sonic starts with 4 lives from the get-go. 5 if you count 0, because the game counts having no lives as still having 1 chance left. Now, those lives never go up. They're not refreshed between levels. They just always stay at 4, and if you lose 3 in one level, and then you move on to the next one and you lose 1 life, then you're going to get kicked back out to the overworld. It doesn't matter how far you got in that level. It doesn't matter how many checkpoints you hit or whether or not you were on the last boss of the level. If you lose that last life, you're still getting kicked out. And this makes it really frustrating. It kind of puts you in a situation where if you die 3 times on a level and then beat it, and then you get to the next level, it almost makes more sense to just jump right off the cliff, because you know that if you get all the way to the end and then die, you've wasted all that time, and you're going to have to play the whole level over again. This design is frustrating because it forces you to play the levels over and over again. You never get a chance to just replay the part you're stuck at. You're always forced to view the entire thing that you've already figured out. I guess the best that could be said for the system is it helps pad out the length of the game, but that's not to the player's benefit, that's to the developer's benefit. You're not going to want to replay these levels over and over again, especially as you get further in the game as they get harder and harder. It's just more frustrating to replay them. Now, the game does kind of throw you a bone when you get to your last life. You'll see a little kind of wing icon like this one here, and what that wing icon does is it lets you skip whatever section you're at and it moves you up to the next checkpoint. It's a nice gesture, and you won't want to take it usually because it makes you feel kind of bad about yourself, but at the same time, it's kind of a hollow gesture because you're probably just going to die on the next section, and then you're still going to have to start the whole thing over again. Now, speaking of forcing you to replay levels, the game has another way that it kind of pads itself out. You'll notice that the last level of each zone is locked until you rescue a certain number of animals. Now, this is kind of like star coins in Super Mario, except it's a little different because rescuing animals is very commonplace. The star coins in Mario, they're hidden in such a way where finding them forces you to explore the levels and see parts of the game that you didn't see before. Sonic, to me, isn't really about exploration. It's about getting to the end as quickly as you can, and not only that, but the animals don't force you to explore because you just get them for killing regular enemies. There's also no reason to really go back and play any of the hard levels, because you can just grind on the easier ones to get the animal that you need. If you go back and play the hard ones, there's less incentive for it because you're more likely to die, and if you get halfway through the level and rescue a bunch of animals and then lose all your lives, you're going to have to start all the way over again, and there's just this risk associated with it the entire time. The game wants you to go back and replay these levels, but at the same time, there's no incentive to do so. There's nothing that you get out of doing it. Now, the other thing that Lost World does is it introduces parkour to the Sonic series, which really feels unnecessary. I don't think anybody was just dying to do wall runs with Sonic and just waiting for this moment for parkour to show up. Parkour doesn't make a lot of sense to me because there's only a few walls where you're not going to be tall enough to jump over them and you'll have to use it, and otherwise, it's never faster than just jumping. Jumping over a wall is always quicker than having Sonic do parkour on it. The wall runs and jumps are difficult to control and even just difficult to activate, and so I think you'll find yourself for the most part ignoring it throughout the game. It's an interesting idea, but not one that was actually of any value to the gameplay. Now, I'm not sure if anybody out there is still playing Sonic games for the plot, but Lost World does a pretty poor job of painting the character in a positive light. His insults are really lame, and sometimes even the dumbest villains come across as more intelligent than him.
One word of helpful advice: diet and exercise.
That's 3 words.
The big conflict in the game is actually caused by Sonic. The whole giant issue throughout the game is caused by him being stupid and not listening to someone else's instructions and just acting before thinking. This conflict forces him and Tails to pair up with Dr. Eggman, and the ironic thing is it's Eggman that winds up earning your sympathy because he behaves like a rational adult. He understands the gravity of the situation, and he's willing to work with these people that he doesn't like because he sees that he doesn't have any other choice. Meanwhile, Sonic and Tails just kind of behave like children and are just slinging insults at him the entire time.
I'll supply the brains. You will supply the brawn I need to get past the Zeti.
Oh, and you're asking so nice.
Good one, buddy.
Thanks.
Man up, Tails.
I would say that in the game, the early levels are better than the later ones. The camera moves a lot more dynamically. The production just feels a lot better and a lot stronger. Sonic is really fast, and you're always in control of him, or at least more in control of him than you are towards the end of the game. Now, unfortunately, as the game goes on, this kind of peters out. The production values disappear, and some of the worst boss fights that I've ever had the displeasure of playing start to pop up. Now, you might have fun for a little bit, and if you're a Sonic fan, I mean, let's be honest, you're going to be buying this anyway. But as for me, I don't think I could give this any better than a 2 out of 5.